Hi, everyone. Welcome to Lift Moments on the Mend. So we have Pastor Zay that's coming in. He's going to talk about me for a minute. Y'all know we give y'all like 5 minutes of laughter before we get started. And tonight was completely my fault on why we was late. Because I was like, where is he?
You fine. You fine.
so, um, so I got a lot on my plate. Normally, I don't start out this way, which is how I got to how I am today. But this year's kind of big for me. I didn't realize it was going to be here. Doing things for my practice, even slowing myself down in practice, because I've had to realize that my mother is aging and doing some stuff, and I'm her only child. Uh, and then my stepdad is aging, and they both they really young. Pastor Zay knows both of my parentals that are still here. It I don't know, they have like this youthful juice, but their bodies don't add up to the youth juice. So it's totally different than when your body and your mind say the same thing. So slowing down a little bit and then looking at other ventures, using my other degree. Cause yeah, should have been doing it in the first place. So so yeah, this is really so I forgot to send him the code. That's what I'm saying. I so forgot to send Pastor Zay the code to get onto the the StreamYard, and I'm just sitting here waiting. And so he being so gracious tonight, because I'm looking at him like he chewing something too. Y'all know I get jealous. I finally found the blur, but he got a whole background, and then he chewing something. I feel
And
bad
then,
when he chew though. I mean, they gonna bring it when he start chewing. Um,
I
it's
don't know.
like he get his meal together, um, and then he give it to y'all. So welcome tonight. And tonight, I've been sitting this week, and I picked the scripture this week. I'll throw that out there. And I really didn't pick a scripture. I really picked a story of Job. And so I have struggled with this text for a really long time, and um it is all the month for me. I love the month of March because it is social work month, it is women's month, and it is my birthday month. So I always tell my mama I was supposed to be born in March. So and I was born on Pie Day. Anybody want to celebrate me on Monday? I'll put my cash app up, or you can send me some money to give me some pie. Oh no! But at the end of the day, man, this text has perplexed me because of one particular figure, and I was like, we could build something out around Job 2 and 9, but then I said, nah, because it'd be a whole bunch of side eyes, but we still gonna mention it though, because ever since seminary, when I learned what some of those words meant that she said, I was like, oh snap, maybe she wasn't trying to be nasty, with Hebrew being a real text, uh, but we'll get there tonight. So tonight we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna get to it so we can get to it. We're gonna talk about retribution, recourse, and restoration. So Job, the world is looking crazy, and Job is one of these texts that look super crazy, like psycho even. Because you're trying to figure out how this man who like prayed, he woke up every day and prayed for his kids. Like he woke up every day and prayed for his stuff. Like, how did God and Satan make a bet out on Job? I mean, like fight me. Literally. I bet. There's a whole bet out on him. But then the more I have studied this text, I have found out that I don't know if it if the bet was fair, um, because what they bet on was something Job wasn't going to do anyway. And so I don't know if the bet was fair once you read the text, because Job prayed for his stuff, he prayed for his kids, he prayed for all of that, because he knew that God was able to take care of that. So I don't know if the bet was fair, but y'all, that can be a debate y'all can have after this session tonight. Let y'all know I'm a therapist, as I said session. But anyhow, we're talking about retribution, recourse, restoration. So this is the only text that I'm gonna put up tonight, because I'm the reader, and then I'm gonna thrust Pastor Zay into this moment. We're gonna read Job 42:12a. The Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning. This is the one verse in this whole 42 chapters that makes me think that the bet wasn't fair anyway. And I get to that. I'll get to it. So we're gonna start out with retribution. Retribution is the dispensing or receiving of reward or punishment, especially in the hereafter. Y'all get tired of hearing that word tonight, because I it really tore me up when I read through this and I saw it, because the Lord blessed the latter days of Job. I like how it's written. It didn't say the Lord blessed Job in the latter days. No, the Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning days. So Zay, I have an argument that I want to put up. I do not believe that Job was humble at the beginning of this, nor do I believe that he had any patience at the beginning of this entire situation of his story.
You typically don't disagree, but I would have to disagree. I don't think that this was about Joel's patience at all.
Oh, I don't think no. I actually agree that it wasn't about patience. Because that's what the church tried to take it to. Had the patience of Job.
Yeah, I don't.
I don't think it was about patience, nor do I do not think it was about patience, nor do I think he was humble at the beginning of this story.
I
And I
think he
said,
was humble, and I think he was patient.
don't think he was patient, don't think he was humble. Now, the reason I say that is coming from a clinical context. Because when people, Dr. Cecilia Williams, if she ever watched this, I hope she can email me, contact me. But that is my dear autonomous professor from Clark Atlanta University. And one day she pulled me over and she said, "You are a backwards narcissist." And I said, "Excuse me?" Now, you know, the word narcissist is so hard. Like, it's what I say, it dug deep down when she said it. Because I was like, narcissist. All I heard was narcissism. And I was like, "Oh, narcissist, like, I'm not self centered and all about me. Like, you didn't lost your mind." That's all I could hear. But she said backwards. And so this is why I say I don't think he was humble at the beginning, nor do I think that he was patient at the beginning, because this is what Black community would do. And this is where I got caught up. Because Job did not consider himself when I read chapter one. I read chapter one so many times before I put this up to make sure I wasn't crazy. Job did not pray for himself, did not consider himself, which I think now, looking at it in context of how we can apply this to community, what happened to the Black community that we don't take care of ourselves? And what happened to the individual person in community that they don't pray for themselves? They pray for everything they have. They make sure that everybody okay. But that is a lack of humility, because what happens is I don't think I'm good enough. And so to be humble, that to care for yourself and to be humble are two different things. I mean, and they don't go against one another. And that is why I believe in this case this bet wasn't fair, because I see this text as it getting Job to a place where he had relationship with God, and in relationship with God, he was able to see the importance of himself. So his latter days were blessed.
I'm going to have to totally disagree with you.
Go ahead.
I think this text is one. I want to say I believe Job was humble. I do believe that Job was patient. Um, do I think he gets upset and bothered and his humanity shows up? Yes.
Hmm.
I think that this text is more about God and God's lack of patience and humility
So you
versus
see how you get the people started. You,
versus Job's. I think this is more about God's, and I shouldn't even say lack of patience from God. I should say God's lack of humility. God's lack of humility and God's ego.
so see, what's your side? Because I actually like when we not on the same page. Because eventually, by the end of the night, we still come to the same page.
Um, I think that God is literally thumbing God's nose at Satan.
Mm.
Um, I think this text, this book, is about God revealing that God is still God, even when you don't think I'm God.
Mm.
I'm God enough to be God that I can make somebody do what they should not be able to do and would not do because I'm God. And because I'm God and I'm so good, they still gonna give me praise. And so because this is God really coming at look at the conversation. This conversation is never inclusive of Job. It's about Job, but it's never inclusive of Job. It's about Satan, Hasatan, Lucifer, who has now been kicked out of heaven. And what was Hasatan's job? Well, Hasatan is Old Testament. I'm playing around with words, but you get what I'm saying. What was Satan? What was Lucifer's job in heaven? He was the
Music.
praise and worship leader.
You called the praise. I just said music. You done called the praise and worship leader.
He was the praise and worship leader. He was the one who made the music, who made worship. The Bible describes him as a human living organ who was more beautiful than
Mm.
all of the other angels. And so God is saying that I have made humanity a little less than angels. I've given them dominion that you lost, and this dude is broken, and he's still gonna praise me, and you wouldn't, and you had everything. This is God talking to Satan, saying, "Nanny, nanny, boo boo."
So I no,
You,
and I agree with you on that. The only reason I'm sitting here on this part with Job though is because it disturbs me that in Job 1.
it's just water, y'all. It's just water. I just want to be clear. It's just water
Job, why you had to justify that it was water?
because I didn't want nobody thinking I'm drinking on camera. It's just water.
You know I bust out laughing.
Yeah.
Let him and drink your water, sir. Go and drink your water. Go and drink your
I've been having
hallelujah.
a really bad headache for 2 days, so I'm trying to make sure that
Hallelujah.
it's not that I'm dehydrated. So I'm trying to drink as much water as I can.
I
So
need you to drink your water though. Nobody thought that but you. So you
I just
look.
want to be clear.
Did you disappear in the background of your new house? In of your house screen?
Yeah.
Let me get to what I was saying because I promise y'all this gets good. Because I love it when me and Zay don't start out on the same page. Because I'm looking at the humanity of Job, and I'm trying to see how, hopefully, to educate some people, how this bet actually happened. Because I got a brother that did not include himself in his own prayer for others. He woke up to pray for other people. He woke up to take care of everything. As a therapist, that's the people that come to my office. That's me. Like I wake up and take care of everybody, everything, but I don't see where my care is necessary.
But I don't think that's a lack of humility.
No, no. Understand what I mean by humility? I didn't say he wasn't humble towards others, but sometimes we will intertwine that self care is selfish, and therefore I am not humble in what I do have. But self care and the fact that you care for yourself is one of the largest acts of humility that humans can have. And I see that in this text, along with how you describing God. Because in this text, since you have known me for so long, I yelled it out in class one night that God is a petty God. Because God was petty in this text.
God is narcissistic.
Mm. So now I had a problem though when she called me a backwards narcissist. And it started
God,
out with this.
God is a narcissist. God, and we don't want to deal with that. And I know some people get mad at me. Oh well. But it says in the biblical text that I am a jealous God. Have no other gods for me. You can't argue the text. You can't argue the text. It says, I am a jealous God, have no other gods before me. In fact, one of the 10 commandments is make no graven images and worship this because I am. You can't even again. We talked about this before in another context. Well, let's take it and use in this context. Moses asked to see God's front. God tells him, "You can't handle my front."
So he gave him back.
So I give you my back so you can handle this, because God knows that God is so great. God asks questions. God has the psalmist and has even others to ask questions. Who's greater than God? None. No, the Bible tells you that. So I don't see this as a lack of humility on Job's part. And I'm not trying to change the subject or not deal with what you're saying. And I do understand that my ability to understand therapeutic and psychological practices and ideals are limited in scope, extremely limited in scope in comparison to you. But I do have a somewhat understanding of these types of things, and I don't see him as being humble. What I do see is that Job doesn't understand self care. We can agree on that. We can definitely
Yes.
agree on that. I
And
can say
that's
that
what I'm
Job
going.
has a lack of, I would actually say that Job has a lack of self confidence because Job
Oh,
cares not for himself, but he cares for others to the detriment. I think Job shows us in this text not so much lack of humility, but that Job is a people pleaser.
mm,
Job is trying to get everybody to see him, not so much as humble and great, but Job is trying to get everybody to see him as the one who protects and takes care of them. Job is so busy taking care of everybody else, like Margaret, that Job for sometimes forgets to take care of himself. And
and
so,
that's where the lack of humility is. Like humility. It literally is a space where you understand what you need and understand where you are and understand where you need to grow. And when you do not take care of yourself, for those people who think that's meek and mild and humble, it's actually it is it erodes the very humanity of who you are. Because now you're saying, I can do all things through me. Watch me do it. And you end up breaking yourself, not taking care of yourself, not being there for yourself, which moves you out for me in my understanding of what it means to be humble. Because if I'm humble, I'm going to be able to tell you, hey, this isn't working out. This isn't doing. And for me, I feel like through the text, we watch Job move into states of humility,
self awareness and humility.
self-awareness and humility. And so I put here, retribution will happen when there's a lack of humility. And that's why I said we're gonna end up getting on the same page. Let me tell y'all something. Let me be clear. Me and Zay did not talk about this before. He knew a hint of it. But we have talked about Job before, and I do. We have disagreed about Job 1 for probably 15 years. Let's just because I have said the same thing, and now I've got more clear about how I feel about Job chapter 1. And Zay has literally said the same thing for about 15 years. So I put the ellipse at the end because truthfully, I don't think that God was humble in this text at the beginning. And I don't think that Job had an understanding of humility that was healthy because he did not have good care. And so here's retribution. When you don't take care of yourself and when you're not in a space where you can see how humble it is to take care of yourself, you will lose what you got, even though you're praying for it to be covered. So it left me with this thought. Are we sitting in relationship for something, or are we sitting in relationship with? And I'm gonna fix that because I just saw my typo. Yeah, I see it. But what are we doing? What ship? Are we moving for the ship or are we moving with? Now, let's put it on the page. Let's get there. Because again, retribution, recourse, and restoration. If you are in a space where you cannot take care of yourself, if you're in a space where God and Satan got time to bet on you, then there's something wrong with your sight for yourself. Because in the text, Job didn't start out caring for himself. He cared for everything that he had. Now I've heard people preach that Job cared about material things. I don't see that in the beginning of the text. I think he genuinely cared for people so much that he wasn't inclusive of the care for himself. And so are we in relationship for? are we in relationship with? Are we in relationship for the status of knowing that we know God and God is able? Because it never says in this text that he didn't know God was able. That's the part that's beautiful. God is able through this entire text. Or are we in relationship with God so that we can have a understanding that God is able with me present? I can include myself in the growth of who I am and how things move and how things have been. I can be present there.
And so I think one of my points of contention with what you just said is that the fact that they bet on Job is indicative of Job's own sight for himself. And I think that these are two separate instances happening at the same time. I think God is always in heaven using us as tools or pawns or
Oh,
objects to deal with God's own stuff in the heavenlies. I don't think Satan, in this text we're going to use Satan because I don't think Satan has stopped entering heaven asking about us.
yeah.
I think Satan still goes up into heaven with the sons and daughters of God who present themselves before God. And I think God still is shocked that Satan has the audacity to still show up after all these years.
Yeah, I'm
And
mitigating y'all.
and Satan has more faith a lot of times than us because Satan says, you made me for this. And although you kicked me out, I still have access. I'm going to keep coming until you allow me back in. And many of us will get a door closed and stop when Satan keeps showing up and keeps saying, but since you gave me this job and since you let me in, I'm going to do what you gave me to do because I want back in. I won't back in. And so I think that these are two separate things. I think that the conversation with God and Satan has absolutely nothing to do with Job. But Job has dealing with his own stuff as God and Satan are dealing with him. Because
Yes.
if you read chapter 1, Satan is coming at Job because God keeps bragging on Job. So and God bets on Job when Satan bets against Job. But Satan is not, but Job is only a pawn. This is a supernatural war that we are pawns in between. Because
Woo.
it is not about us, it's about who's gonna win and who's gonna get the glory and who's gonna get the authority. And we just happen to have to play out our parts in the midst of all this. And so Job is trying to juggle what is happening to him psychologically and spiritually because he feels it, but he can't describe it. And then he's got to deal with all of that while God and Satan are doing what they're doing because they want what he has. And what he has is praise. Who you gonna praise at the end of this? Are you gonna throw up your hands and say, God, you still God? Or you gonna throw up your hands and say, Satan, you won this one. You got it. God has not shown up. God does not have what you have. Because that's the fight. And if you go back and look at when God kicks Satan out, that has been the fight. Satan makes sure that Satan takes what God wants, a third of the heavenlies. Satan takes a third of the heavenly host with it. And God ain't got over it since.
So here we are again. Like they say, we not on the same page, but recourse is a source of help or strength because you have two, in my opinion, in this book, two stories going on. Like Zay is saying, I got a story of a man that has zero clues that he's got this bet going on. Like he doesn't. But I also have a man that's not aware of himself and his own needs that he's put above. He put everybody above himself. So for me, on the humanity side, that's a concern because how many other brothers and sisters are putting everything above what they need, and we're missing out on their health. They're missing out on how to even engage themselves in a way of love, care, and humble space of knowing what they need. Then we have God who is aware of that, who bragging about it.
Because I believe it is God's hope that you will come to the fullness of who you are and still give God glory.
Ah. Zay, so I'd be messing with Zay. Zay just travels us right on where we're going. Cause he gonna preach real good at the end of this one. And so, because it's Women's Month, I'm gonna sneak something in though, because I want to come back to something else. This is where I get really puzzled. Chapter 2, because I really believe that there was a point missed here. So 2 and 9. Most of us know this text because we got preachers. They preach it everywhere. I'm good in Baptist on the inside, and I have heard this preached so many ways. I have heard this preached on a Women's Day, and I'm like, how the world are you preaching this on a Women's Day and talking bad about the woman, like dogging out? But I heard it preached on a Women's Day. But what it says is, "Curse God and die," is what the text says that we read. Now, I did a word study on this, and I want to thank Randall Bailey for making me go do it because I was really confused about where this was going. But then, as a humanitarian, social worker sitting over here, I got discombobulated when I read chapter 2. It would bother me. And so, Margaret's interpretation, after sitting with Dr. Randall Bailey, I went back and I read it again in context of what the word there for curse really means in Hebrew. It means blessed. Barak does not say curse. It says blessed. So bless God and die. And I got messed up when we went in class about it because I'm like, so she really not, is she bashing him? Is she being sarcastic? She could have been doing all of that. But I started to read what was going on. And he maybe, and this is Margaret's interpretation, maybe Job didn't really hear what this woman was saying because somewhere in there, his wife had a dose of reality for herself. I lost everything too. And so now I'm awakened to the grief, the loss, and the suffering of how you have poured out to a God that does not appear to be showing up. So maybe since you already started blessing him in chapter 1, maybe you should just keep on blessing him so this can end. So where are the questions with that? Because now it goes to, are we in relationship for? We're in relationship with? Because the recourse of this is help and strength. So how are we sitting at? Like, and maybe Zay, I don't know if you see it the same way.
I do want to say this as a caveat that I didn't do a word study on this. That Job story, it kind of does a lot for me. So I stay away from Job's story unless I absolutely have to, unless the Lord say preach it, and I stay away from Job story in that regard. But when you just said what you said about the word bless, I did read the story Achan and the stolen materials, and we like to preach against Achan that he touched the cursed thing. And I heard a preacher take it so far and talking about stop touching those cursed things, witchcraft and all that stuff, those Ouija boards, and he was so far off. Because when it said a cursed thing, that word accursed is very similar to the word bless God. It literally means when Achan touched the accursed thing, he touched the thing that God had already claimed for God's self. I'll let you think about that. Achan touched and possessed and took ownership of something that God had already claimed for God's self. When we bless God, we are giving God what God has already claimed for God's self because God created us to bless God's name. So it's the same similar ideal and idea. I mean, if you took it and put it together, and you had to do your good preaching and exegesis, but it's there. There is some there. In the words of Eric, there is some there. Eric Thomas. There's some there. There's some there. The Reverend Dr. Eric Thomas. There's some there. And so when you look at this word to bless, Barak, in this text, and the word that is used when Achan touches the accursed thing, which means that it is owed to God or God has already claimed it, we see that there is a connection to what God is claiming. See, God wanted that because God cannot touch those things that gold and that silver and those things that Achan took. God can't touch it. There's nothing that God can physically do with it, but God claimed it for God's self because it would be something that God could use to show the glory of God in the temple of God or in the house of God. What is it that we have taken out of God's presence that God has said to keep in God's presence? And so I think when we look at Job, what we're seeing is Job and God are wrestling at some point spiritually, although Job doesn't know what's going on in the spirit, in the realm, yet he can just sense it over what are you going to give me and what are you going to give up? And so it's this pull and push, this friction that Job is feeling. And I think when you get to this wife who it has become one with Job can feel it, because not only has Job lost it, but not only has she watched her family be lost, but now she's got to watch her husband lose whatever little bit he got left. And she's got to deal with the fact that I've already lost this and I can't get that back. And I got to watch you go through this and lose this. And how do I grasp what you fighting with God over so I can at least keep what little bit I got left? And that's all many of us are trying to do, is we're trying to hold on to what little bit we got left as God is pushing us and pulling us, and Satan is pushing us. And so Paul, if I can jump up the New Testament, I know we ain't supposed to do it, but Paul talks about a similar thing when Paul said that this thorn was given unto me so that it would buffet me, so that I would not get too I wouldn't get too puffed up. I wouldn't get too arrogant because of what I got and what I can do. So God, this messenger of God, not the messenger of Satan, but this was an angel. This was an angelos. This was an angel that came and gave me something, so that every time I got ready to do something, I had to remember. It's what God did with Joseph, with Jacob, when God touches his hip and takes his hip and breaks him at his strength, his place of strength. And so his name becomes Israel. And every time he walks, he remembers, I used to be Jacob, but now I'm Israel. But Jacob is still here, because if you go back and read when he gets ready to die, it says, and Jacob goes to sleep with the ancestors, and Israel is no longer there, because Jacob showed back up, because you still got to deal with who you were. So here we are, Job. Job is just fighting. So I think that's what when we talk about strength. And so we're talking, what is God going to give? What is the next? Because recourse also means, what's the next strategy? What's the next step? What's the next plan? How are we going to, what is our recourse for this? What is the course of action? Where are we going to go from here? How are we going to get from you took everything, God, and I still got to bless you? Because that was the accursed thing, because it was yours in the first place. Everything I got, you gave me. So I can't possess what you took from me, because it was yours in the first place. So how do I wrestle with this thing of having to be blessing you and be blessed at the same time? How do we as humans deal with the fact that we're broken but still blessed? God blessed me but took everything. God told me I was blessed, because you are called blessed. Blessed in the fields, blessed in the cities, blessed when you come, blessed when you go, but I ain't got nothing.
It ain't got nothing.
The children of Israel were God's chosen people. They were blessed, yet they were in bondage for hundreds of years. Broken, beat, but blessed. The blunder. What do we do? And so if I was a preacher, this would be a good series to start off with. What do I do, or how do I handle when God bets on me?
And you giving people your stuff now.
What I learned a long time ago in preaching class, you can take the title, but you can't preach it like I can.
I ain't finna fool with you. I ain't finna fool with you, because you done get sip on your water, because you done gave us our first clothes, and we ain't even there.
So you can take it, but you can't do it like I can do it. So it's all right.
Well, you asked the question, because I knew you was gonna come up. Yeah, Zay my wordsmith, my dictionary, he my everything. So I knew he was gonna come up with the second half. I didn't even put it on there, because you find recourse in the center water. Now, Job 14:9. Now listen, because I have studied Job. I literally have sat in this book, because I just didn't understand how God could bet on somebody. I was really, if y'all know the family I came from, we got a little addiction problem. So I just couldn't understand how God could fall into that in my early years.
Because the bet was fixed.
Because the bet was fixed. And I said, you know what? God had a whole bet on something that was not even involved in the bet, and Satan went with it. But anyhow, that's Margaret's thought. Because not through this entire book do we see would Job curse God, because that wasn't even on the table. It was just the bet. Job didn't even know that was a possibility in my mind when I read this, because here we go. Job went ham on everything. But get to Job 14:9. The recourse is in the scent of water. So read that. If you go and look at it, I even put it up because I get happy and I preach it. And I am not the preacher of the hour on this platform. But when I did have an opportunity to take this text, I see what Job was going ham. Like, I come out of a woman. This is some Y'all know me. This is some BS. I can't believe I'm sitting here. I'm scraping the boils of my skin as my wife is reminding me that she's grieving too and tells me what to do so this thing can end. As my friends want to come for me and land. And I'm sitting here and this is what we get. But then somewhere in the middle of an entire chapter of this story, we find him talking about a tree stump. And I'm like, what that stump got to do with nothing? That's for me when I read it. What? But then he goes on to describe this natural occurrence with this tree stump. The tree cut down, it looked dead. But then there are roots. But if the roots in the tree don't have water, then there will be no recourse. On the other hand, that is not what the text says. It said, but it smells the water. You ain't even got to touch it. At the scent of water, here comes this recourse, which is coming back to retribution, in my opinion, again. This dispensing of a reward. I feel like in this part of it, and for those who are listening tonight, please take this. Somewhere in this text is what Job said, I matter. I'm still alive in all of this. So what we about to do is change it up. And Job, we watch from 14 to 42 how Job changes up and he starts to put himself in the space of humanity, humility, and honest ownership of who Job is. So it wasn't about praying for the stuff or pleasing people. We watch Job move from being a people pleaser that's unaware of what's happening and why it's happening to one who's beginning to care for himself. Because somewhere in there, he had smelt some water. I said it real like Cartersville. He had smelt that water, Zay. So here's this second piece of retribution for recourse.
7 through 14 confirms everything I just said.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to go through it line by line, precept by precept, but I can get here in the words of one of my favorite bishops because I can read. And because I can read, I can see that this confirms what we just said because he smells the water. So even as he's dying, as he's cutting, he realizes that there is a hope that he can still get to, because sometimes we like to tell somebody, can you see it? But sometimes it just takes one of your senses to hold on to what you
one
you
of
need.
your one of them, Zay, please don't make me shout up here in this building I'm in. One of your
we got differently abled people
differently able
who may not be able to say it, but at least they can see it. They may not be able to see it, but at least they can hear it. They may not be able to hear it, but at least they can smell it. And if they can't smell it, at least they can touch it. But if all that fails, they got something that the devil can't take. If I can just imagine what the Lord said. Sometimes the Lord will get in your imagination and give and show you what you can't tell nobody, what you can't touch, what you can't smell. And so Job was saying, it's this water. It may not be there, but I can feel it. It's a mirage, but something got to shift because it's some water somewhere. Paul Morton, we laughed at Paul. Paul, he may not get everything right, but he got that right. What can bring you outside and take you inside? It's sometimes just the smell of the water because you know it's about to rain. And so sometimes if you can just smell the water, it'll shift it. Why you got a raincoat on? As I get closer to 40, they ask me, why you it's because something in me felt the water coming. How did you know? That back of mine tightened up and I could feel it. My knee popped the wrong way and I knew the water was coming. Sometimes you may not be able to trace the water. I don't know where it's coming from, but Lord, I got to eat tonight. I don't know how it's going to happen, but Lord, I need some water. And then all of a sudden, here come a cash out. Here comes somebody saying, you know what? I got too much. Here you go. I didn't know it. I didn't understand it, but I smelled the water. And I'm not talking about me personally. I'm just saying in general, I becoming all of us. You can find what you need in the water. But I go to a very Afrocentric church. You know, I'm a rise boy. I love my pastor. We ain't got no problems. My pastor and I love her. And when we go to rise, we talk about jumping in the flow and get in the, because everything you need is in the flow. It's in the water. The water in the Bible has a multiplicity of uses. It's a multiplicitous usage item in the Bible. When you talk about water, it represents spirit. It represents change. It represents the renewing of something. It represents hope. It represents possibility. And so when you can smell the water, you smell all of that. You can't get hope without change. Hope runs and springs eternal. You can't get hope without change. You can't get hope without faith. You can't for faith is the substance of things hoped for. Hope shifts a thing. Hope gives us. So when you can smell the water, you jumping in something that everything you need, change, hope, faith, persistence is in the water. Because nothing can stop water, not even a dam. The dam only holds it back, but a dam, if it gets just one little crack, can't stop the water. You gotta pray that dam don't ever get a little weak, because even the dam can't hold the water if the dam is not built correctly. And so nothing really stops water. You can change the course because water can adjust. Water is malleable. Water understands that if this way is blocked, I got another way to go. And if this way don't move, if I get enough pressure, if I put enough weight on it, because I'm water, I can cut through most anything. Because I'm water, I can push everything. But also because I'm water, I can dissolve some things. Some things just gonna get washed away because I'm water. I'm in the water. I'm in the water. Water is what we call the universal solvent. Everything that hits water gets dissolved. Everything that hits water gets shifted and changed. What is it in your life that needs a little water? So can you smell it? So the tree understood that. The tree said, I'm broken. But if I can just get some water, I'm broken. But then water also represents Jesus. For he is the living bread, but he's also the water that never runs dry. We talked to that woman when he calls her that bad name on that mountain. He said, I got something. And I hear G. Patterson, I've got something that that the word, it's some water. This is an eternal water. The well will never run dry. What is in the water? That's all I'm asking. I mean, y'all can go on. I'm just...
Y'all know they like to keep time because I wanted him to keep going on the travel. But I'm gonna mess him up one more time because I said in this case, I really believe that this is where right here, 14 is where Job was like, oh, I see it. And so because of this sin, he began to understand, like, I still got some life in me. He smelt this water, so he still got life in me. So if that's the case, and we watch him move through it, and we also go to 42. Now, chapter 42, because Job starts out in this space of not caring for himself. I'm speaking strictly from a therapist, and this man did not care about himself in chapter 1. It was about everybody but him. And then you got a whole bet on you from a narcissistic guy who's like, I'm gonna go ahead and put a bet out here that ain't got nothing to do with the man he's betting on. Like, I don't even see how it was a possibility. And then, because they finna come back and do it, but I put this part of the text up on purpose because the utterance that happened between 1 and 42 got us to this text right here. Therefore, I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. Job finally started to see himself as great, connection to God. And here we are watching him live in the space of self-care in chapter 42. There's so much self-care in this chapter because self-care does not mean that I'm going to get my hair, my nails, and all of that stuff done. That's beautiful self-care. That's the basis of self-care. But self-care, man, I understand how to reconnect to community without losing myself. I understand how to be connected to myself without getting even lost in that. Because now I can utter some stuff. I can say some stuff, and my connection to God is so great, but yet I can still see myself in the connection. That's how I see this in 42. Zay raised his hand like we in class. So I feel like he got something else because he got like preacher sub beads going on.
I'm just hot. I hadn't turned the air on because it's still wintertime, and so my big mama would not please if I turned the air on in the middle of the summertime because you don't dress towards the weather, you dress towards the season. So I'm not turning the air on, and it's too much
Yeah.
noise outside, so I can't heist the window or open the door.
You are straight from Georgia. Next.
But before we can get to 42, you got to go through 22.
Oh, okay.
I'm looking at this, and Eliphaz, the Temanite. These are one of the three friends of Joseph. Starts this come on why Joseph on why I said Joseph, excuse me, why Job is so wicked. And he asks a question: can a mortal be of use to God? Can even the wisest be of service to him? And so this starts this whole idea of people attacking Job. 22, 23, 24, all 25, 26, no, 24, 25, 22, 23, 24, 25. They are coming. His friends, his so-called friends, are coming at him about why he's in the predicament he's in. But 26, Job answers back. And he said, even if all that's true, God's majesty is unsearchable. Even if all that's true. So now Job is getting into a place of actual relationship with God, and not just I have known of God. And so your question that you asked, relationship for or relationship with, I had no problem with that part. That part was God. I have no problem. Because 26, we see it. 26, Job says God's majesty is so we see Job start off one place. God bless this, give them this, touch this, to now I know God. See, we like to preach 42 about Job saying, I now know, but Job gets to that part before he ever gets to 42. Job gets there in 26. Job lets his friends know that you can say whatever you want, but there's one thing I know. There's one thing I'm for certain. That God is God. And God gonna still be God. And see, this is when God says, now you have lived through it all, and you still go. So I didn't understand what my great-grandmama and my grandmama and my granddaddy would say. I don't know nothing else, but I know God is God. And they could take one chicken and feed 12 people. I don't know how they did it, but they knew that if they took it, it was like Jesus, the 12 loaves of bread. You see what I did there? And he took it, and he laid it at the proverbial feet of God. See, prayer is about intimacy with God. It ain't about how long you be with God, because some of y'all go pray for 3 or 4 hours and come out the same way. But prayer is going to the feet. Y'all know what Hebrew feet mean, right? So you get to a place of intimacy, a place where God can sow something in you, and you can receive something from God. But it's also about you giving to God something of yourself, you opening yourself up. And so in 26, Job is realizing me and God have had to get together, and I've had to receive something different from God, not just the material stuff, not just the children, because I'm grieving all of this. Because what we don't like to talk about is not only do we grieve people, but we grieve things. And so some of you are still grieving the loss of something and someone. And because you can't process the grieving of something or someone, you are stuck in betwixt and between where you are supposed to be, because you cannot process. But in 26, Job began to say, you know what? This really wasn't even about me. 26, God said, Job said, this is all about who God is and who God will show. And so God being narcissistic is not bad, because God is God. Narcissism is bad for humans because we're trying to take on something we cannot possess.
Woo! That part.
God being narcissistic is not bad. It is our finite understanding of narcissism that causes us to hate that word, and for some of y'all to get mad at me, but you didn't wait till the end. So I hope that the people who turned it off and said the boy is crazy will come back and watch the ending of it, because it's not how a thing starts, it's how a thing ends. I'm in the book. And so it is the fact that God is narcissistic, and God can afford to be narcissistic because God is in process with us, and because God is the great intelligent. When God sees what it is, God understands and becomes that which we need when we need it. For I am that I am, and that is who I will be. And so when you need it, I will become that. So I can be narcissistic because I'm always becoming that which is necessary. I have it because I am God. And your limitations don't stop me from being God, because like water, I become what I need to be at the time I need to be it, and I find a way. See, water doesn't have a mind. Water just knows that it's water. God, though, has a mind, so God understands that everything that we see in the earth, we think we're the only one made in the image of God, but everything that we see in the earth represents a characteristic and a trait of who God is. Water, rocks, dirt. Dirt is something that looks like it ain't nothing, and we can't really touch it. We can't really always see it. We can't really taste it, but we have to put some stuff in it in order for something to grow out of it. In the beginning of the earth, in Genesis 1, God takes nothing and grows something out of it. God hovers over the void, dirt, and makes everything come out of it. God is like water that when it moves, it keeps going. It takes things out of the way. It cleanses stuff. It dilutes stuff. It protects stuff. It washes over stuff. It can change. It can be water. It can be ice. And it can be a vapor. God, three in persons, the triune God. Everything we see is what God is a trait of God. Rocks, this thing won't move. This thing is heavy. This thing is untangible. Time does not change rock. But water can change a rock. Rocks become stronger over time. Waters become harder over time. Rocks become harder over time. God, everything we need, everything that God is, we see in nature in some form and some way. So my point is this. Is that Job is now experiencing and understanding that God has become something that Job needed. And Job, in that process, has also become something that Job needed himself. And so the restoration wasn't that he got his stuff back, but that he found himself in God, and he found the realness of who God was in him. The recourse was the actions that it took for Job to get there. And so God was betting on Job because God knew that the bet had been hedged, that the bet had been fixed, that the bet was a winning bet. And see, only a real gambler knows that I got this thing, and so I'm going to bet what I'm betting because I already. If you're a real gambler, I learned a few things from certain folk in my family, because my mama gonna watch this, so I ain't gonna say who I learned it from. But I learned you don't make a bet if you don't know you're gonna win. Only a real gambler bets when they know that they're going to win. The house always wins. The house always wins. A real gambler never makes a bet unless they already know they're going to win. See, it's only the folk who don't know nothing about gambling who go into debt. And so God was letting you know, I already know the end because I've already become what I needed to become at the end of this thing. I know that in in chapter 26, I'm going to show Job something so that by the time he gets to 42, he'll still lift his hands and say, "Ooh, I heard folk talk about God, but now I know God. Because although I lost it all, I didn't lose me." Isn't it weird that Job lost everything and found himself? Maybe God is waiting for you to find yourself. That's why you keep losing. When I find myself, I've already won. And then that's when everything in the earth and in the universe has to align. And that's when my words begin to create what my mind has already seen. Because I've already found myself, that I know now that I'm not just a speaking spirit, but I am a speaking authority because I've been made in the image of God. And whatever God is, I am, because I am that I am is inside of me. And that's how we get to 42.
So it was more on the thing, but it did what God needed it to do. Because this whole thing started out with a thought, and for me, it's the communal thought. We've got to take care of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We are sitting in spaces where things are opening back up. We're sitting in spaces where people they still sick, or they the sickness may be ill of mind, it may be ill in body, could just be ill in self. Job had an esteem problem. Like his base needs were met, and he kept praying for them to be met. But I don't know if he even felt safe in his own space because he's begging for safety for his children. He's begging for things to stay. I don't know if Job felt like he belonged in this space because he's begging for the stuff to stay, for the children to be okay. He didn't have a sense of self when I read this. That disturbed me when I went back and saw it. That you can have a whole bed over you and not know. And then that esteem space. I don't know how Job held himself in regard in chapter 1, but I saw what he did in 42. And then you moving through and you see that your pain is so heavy that you can't even see somebody else hurting. So we don't know what she really said. Can I be honest? But I know that the Hebrew text says she blessed, said, bless God and die. Can we just get this over with? Because now she is hurting too. And if you go read 42, go and read the end. Job's whole tune changed to the point where his friends, they mourned what he did lose so that they could celebrate the restoration of what he had. Replacement and restoration are not interchangeable in this text. Be mindful of how you say it. Because they had to mourn, they had to grieve, they had to honor what was lost so that they could see who he had become. And so sometimes you want to be not you want people to see what you were. But no. Let the community see who you are. Let the community see where you have come from. Let them see what you went through. Let them see that even your pain has violated some other stuff so that when you get to where you can smell the water and realize that you're still alive, that when them other people come and they trying to hate, you can say, but you know what though? I can speak of things that I really didn't know about because God is the one who brought me from here to there. And I can now say, I hear you, God. I see you, God. And the prayer isn't just for the stuff to stick around, but I can actualize myself and see how to maintain connected to you. So how you see it and how you are there. Because somehow we had to sit in a space of retribution so we could get to a recourse for restoration.
That's it, Margaret. Retribution, a recourse for restoration. Watch the text now, because his friends, he doesn't get the stuff back until everything we just said. But watch the text. Watch the text. Watch the shift. His friends begin to experience a portion of what he's already lived through. And he has to bless them and forgive them, and then the stuff comes back because he has realized the power that he has, and it's communal. That's all I'm trying to say. You touched it, you hit it, you touched it, that's it. It was communal when they got on the same level and they shared in the hurt, and they shared in the brokenness that he had, and they opened their mouths. He then had to bless them, forgive them, and then he was blessed double. Everybody wants double, but nobody wants to go through what he went through to get to double. Not even the friends. I think you just killed it. You just nailed it. You put the cherry on top.
So tonight I hope this blessed you. Because I don't our community is sitting in spaces of retribution. And this recourse to restoration is something that it's hard. But there has to be a level of self-care. When he prayed for his friends,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
then he was able to receive. But when he admitted what he did not know, that formulation of that relationship
Mm-hmm.
is stacked out right.
Mm-hmm.
God, I'm in communion with you. So now it's not me praying for something to keep.
Mm-hmm.
But Zay said it in the middle of all of this. Go back and watch it. What was the wrestle for that God already has ownership of? The bet was when it was already won, because Satan even missed the bet. And we missed the bet too when we read this initially. Our God was saying, now he's not going to curse me because I already got him. So it doesn't matter what he goes through, because the wrestle is to bring him back to me
And to bring him back to himself.
and bring him back to himself.
Yeah. It's
So
an
whatever,
hour.
whatever you're dealing with tonight, let that wrestle be to get you back to God and get you back to yourself. Retribution, recourse, and restoration.
Self retribution is a
Hmm.
recourse for restoration. Self retribution is a recourse for restoration.
So I know we are at an hour, and for those of you who are sitting in that self retribution, like you are trying to gather it, you're trying to find it, you don't know where it is. I've done everything I was supposed to. God, why are you not even showing up? Like, what is happening? Sit with the recourse of that, and when you sit still, and when you go in, and you check on all those spaces that are struggling, that wound, let it smell water. Let it find what it needs. So that when it presents itself, it won't carry the burden of others, but it understand in itself how
Mhm.
beautiful it is.
It is, yeah.
And it has a right to be connected to the power source itself. That's all I'm leaving with tonight. They may have to pray or whatnot, but that is all the Dutch has to say.
Prayer, may the Lord watch between me and thee while we're absent one from another. Amen. I know what that prayer means, but we're going to do it tonight. Amen.
Amen. Y'all be blessed. We'll see y'all next week.